And we're back with another episode of Franchise My Business, the podcast for franchisors, hosted by franchisors. I'm your host, Kevin Oldham, and we are going to talk about international expansion. That's pretty cool to think about, right? Let's say you've got an emerging franchise system and you get inquiries from people outside the United States who are interested in flying the flag of your brand. It's like a huge, validation that you're doing something right. And it can be very exciting, but it can also be very confusing. So I'm going to try to demystify things. I'm by no means an international expert. I will disclaim that I was on the international expansion team at our last company, which is a franchisor of real estate and auction offices. We directly migrated our operations into a couple of different countries and continents. And so I'm going to speak from that perspective. I've never sold franchises in Africa, for example. There's a couple of other continents that I've never participated in. I do have some friends that have done that. And so I may get some of those friends on if this is something that's interesting to people and talk more and more about some other continents. But specifically, I'm going to talk heavily about Latin America. I think that's one of the continents or areas that a lot of people start out in. They also will go to Canada. So we're just staying over on this side of the pond. If you're a US based type of franchise, you might be looking at Mexico, Central America, South America, North America in terms of Canada and things like that. And those are all areas that I have experience in, as well as building partnerships in Australia. We did a little bit of a, I'm not going to say sightseeing tour, but curiosity exercise over into Asia. And we're going to talk really just about my experience in expansion into Latin America. So our last company, I can't remember. I think Costa Rica was where our very first office opened that was outside of the United States. And if you look at Costa Rica, it's very similar in terms of like currency is accepted, US currency is accepted there. There's just a lot of parallels. There's a lot of US speaking individuals there. They're a democracy, so they have a relatively stable government compared to other countries that you could expand to. So for us, it made a lot of sense. And because there's a lot of Americans down there, it made a lot of sense. And keep in mind, we were in the real estate space as well. We were selling lifestyle real estate, and a lot of Americans buy lifestyle real estate in Costa Rica. So there was all these reasons that it made sense for us. And when you're thinking about, hey, what's your first location that you expand to if you ever expand outside the United States, it may be a congruent fit because of business practices and the economic environment that country operates in, like it was for us. Or it may just be, hey, this is somebody who reached out to us and we decided to open it. It could be India or whatever, right? How you get there is really following the path of your business. And sometimes you'll have a desire to go into a country and be proactive and target it. And sometimes it will just happen as a result of doing business. For us, I think it was a little bit of both, right? I think that's how we wound up in Costa Rica first. We had some inquiries there. Plus, we looked at it as a key expansion market and realized it would be a really good market for us to expand to. So that's like how we get there and some of the considerations that I would like you to think about, because we get international inquiries all the time for franchises that we're helping market for our business. And you just have to determine whether or not, first of all, they're serious. And second of all, whether or not it makes sense to evaluate that. The next thing you got to think about is the legal structure, right? So you'll be doing business internationally. You want to make sure that you have an attorney or legal firm that is well-versed in helping you navigate that. Each country is different, and it's going to take there's just going to be nuances. Let's just put it that way. There's going to be differences legally in how you structure those agreements. For us, we chose to go the mostly a master franchise route. We partnered with one group per country. I helped us expand into Panama, Costa Rica, and Mexico and Latin America. And like in Panama, for example, we had a big conglomerate that we partnered with, and that we were just one of many franchises. Like they were the John Deere distributor, Isuzu, or John Deere, Isuzu, just all these other entities that they had brought to Panama, and we were one of those entities that they brought to the residents of Panama. You want to look at the legal agreements that you put out there in terms of not only how you're compliant within the country, but also your agreement between you and your master franchisee. And that's most likely what you're going to be looking at is somebody who is very intimately familiar with the country, how business is done there, to then go and develop that country and be responsible for that territory. Okay. So master franchising is pretty popular internationally because most of us are not experts in every single country in the world. The next thing that I think we found is that's a little bit more challenging is just making sure that everybody's on the same page. You're going to have different cultures. Every country is going to be different culturally. So for example, when we were, dealing a lot with getting things done in Latin America, I'm a very fast-paced person, and I would get frustrated at how it would take longer to get stuff done in Latin America. And I was like, oh, that's just culturally like how they operate sometimes, and that is okay. And once I got my mind calibrated around that, it was super cool with it. But I realized that unlike us, and I'm just going to say just probably psychotic Americans who are just super, boom, we're like hammers, right? We just want to get stuff done. Not everybody's like that. And you have to be totally comfortable with that and understand the culture and then work with people in that country based on what's going to work for you culturally and how you operate, as well as their culture. Okay. So that's the other thing that you got to think about is culture. You got to think about the agreement that you're going to have with your franchisee. If it's going to be a master agreement, you got to make sure that you also have the legal work done. Okay. Support is also a little bit different. Just the basic things. We've got quite a few international team members in our digital marketing company. Just culturally, there's different ways that we communicate and all those things that you have to think about. Time zone differences, like just the things that you don't necessarily think about when you're working with somebody in the United States. When you go to expand internationally, there's a whole different set of, I'm not going to say rules, but more like norms and things like that you have to consider. Particularly, let's say you're moving into a primarily German-speaking country and you don't have somebody who speaks German on your team. Okay, that's going to be a problem, right? So you got to think about your team, language barriers, time zone differences, supporting people on time zone differences as well. Do you want somebody in Asia who's basically 12 hours opposite of you? And is that something that you want to sign up for from a support perspective? Only you can answer that question, but those are questions that you have to think about. Other than that, I will tell you it's deeply rewarding to expand internationally. A lot of our international efforts were slower to hit that break even point. And I've never stood up a restaurant in Latin America, for example. And I'm sure there's totally different set of rules. Like I was franchising basically like service types of businesses, but I can tell you that things just are different. Every country is different. Every country operates at a different cadence. You're going to find that because these are master franchise, maybe they take liberties that other franchisees would not. And so you've got to make sure that your compliance engine's operating fully. You've got to work in partnership with these folks as well. It is their country. They're going to know it better than you. And so you really do, in my opinion, learn a lot by franchising internationally. There's quite a few gotchas that sometimes you don't realize it's a gotcha until you're there, and you just get to problem solve through that process. So anyway, if you're somebody who is thinking about expanding via franchising internationally, my number one thing I think that I would do, the very first step, is just reach out to somebody who's done it before that's in your space. If you have a peer or something like that, and they can help share some of those best practices. So if you're in the fitness space and you're looking at expanding into Europe, hey, who has expanded into Europe in the fitness space via franchising? Is that somebody that you can form a relationship with and maybe get some mentorship out of, somebody directly? I'm sure that there are international franchising consultants as well. So that would be something else that you might want to Google. And then obviously you're going to want to get some of that international legal work done as well. So I recommend talking to peers. I recommend talking to attorneys, and then also doing some soul searching and just making sure that that's where you want your business to expand to. Those are some things that I would think about in terms of international expansion with your business in terms of franchising. Until next time, I'm your host, Kevin Oldham, and I just have two asks. Number one, if you like what we're doing here, I'd love it if you hit subscribe. Number two, I'd love it if you left a review as well. That really helps us get more listeners on the Franchise My Business show. Until next time, I hope you have a phenomenal week and be well.